Hello everybody, my name is Manues and welcome to another Eternal Top Decks video here on my channel. Today I finally decided to do a video on the traditional stock Burn Queen, even though I've always kind of resisted it since I preferred a more consistent approach towards the archetype, as you can see from my older Stonescar aggro videos under the Eternal Contender section, which is sort of a similar deck, just in a more consistent approach in terms of 1 and 2 drops, so it curves out more aggressively. But given that Burnt Queen is one of the hot decks in the game right now and it's everywhere, I figured it's time to cover it just for everyone to have it as an option to check out and see how I would adjust the deck within the limitations of how the archetype usually looks like, not as consistent in terms of 1 drops and 2 drops as I would like, for example. Alright, so this is basically an upgrade of what people have been playing at the mid-season Masters. I spent a bunch of time yesterday talking with VSarius on Skype about the deck and sharing my concerns and dislikes about certain things, and managed to convince him on a couple of changes, and he kind of guided me through what he thinks of certain cards and how and what he thinks is changeable and whatnot, and we slowly worked our way to getting a list to where it still has everything that he thinks is important and has all the upgrades that I felt like the deck definitely needs. Alright, so the deck is basically an aggressive burn deck. You try to get in at least 1 hit with every unit and then finish them off with burn. So the deck basically consists of all the most efficient units at doing that and the best burn spells in the game. Alright, let's go over the cards. So let's go over the units first. VSarius told me that the 1 drops were very hit or miss, and he even boards them out in tournament play against a lot of decks, so that's why he doesn't want too many. And I think even Kampfkröte, the initial builder of the deck, I think is running less 1 drops than he used to, so basically no more grenade and drones, only 6 2 power 1 drops. And I basically was the one pushing for more Pyroknight over Oni Ronin in this particular deck. For multiple reasons. First of all, Pyroknight provides some additional flood protection between Flame Blast and other things. So it's nice to have something meaningful to do with your power later in the game. And the deck just doesn't have that high of a unit density that the Warcry, I think, is that good in this deck. Sorry, I had to turn off Facebook in the background real quick, that was annoying, sorry. Alright. So the other thing is the overwhelm is actually kind of a big deal once you're playing for a rapid shot, and we just talked about just getting as much direct damage through as possible. So having a Pyroknight that is blocked by a small unit early and then rapid shotting for it to survive and deal massive amounts of overwhelm damage is a lot better than the occasional Warcry from Oni Ronin in this deck, I think. Also, the problem is the deck doesn't run a ton of removal and stuff to make these units matter for a lot of turns. So often after 1 or 2 attacks they will stare down a bigger unit that you can't attack into and that you also cannot remove beneficially, or might not want to remove because you only have burn spells and you rather use the burn spells on other things like the opponent directly and stuff. So in that case, Oni Ronin quickly just sits there doing nothing and staring at the opponent funny, while Pyroknight basically sits there waiting to become relevant again, and the opponent cannot ignore a Pyroknight long term. He has to kill it. A Pyroknight sitting on the board of a burn player for a while cannot be ignored for the entire game. At a certain point the opponent has to deal with it or might get punished by the ultimate. So that's another nice thing, while Oni Ronin after a couple turns often can be ignored and doesn't even need to be dealt with because it's just sitting around being useless. And yeah, with the lower density of units, especially in the early curve drops and overall in the deck, it also takes a lot more turns on average to draw the unit that you Warcry on. So the Warcry, it takes longer for the Warcry to be impactful in the game. So that's also why I think the Warcry is like less beneficial as it would be in other decks. I'm normally a pretty big fan of Ronin, but for all the mentioned reasons, I think Pyroknight is the primary one drop here in this deck, and Oni Ronin only to like basically have more than 4. Next we have Argenport Instigator, not much explanation needed, just the best aggressive 2-drop in the game, together with like Champion of Glory and Awakened Student, which are arguably both slightly weaker in a dedicated aggressive deck because they need longer to come online and stuff and don't have the added bonus of dealing damage to the opponent. Next we have 2 Cabal Countess. Card is situationally awesome, and in a lot of situations just very slow and very fragile and vulnerable and doesn't do a whole lot, which is why there's only 2, just to have like a couple more units overall in the deck. And it's kind of nice against slower decks to try and like outplay them and punish them. They, for example, wipe your board, you can end of turn Countess, so she often acts sort of as a burn spell plus in a lot of cases. And also benefits from Bandit Queen and her own ultimate to attack into some blockers that you otherwise couldn't attack into. And gives the deck a little more ways to carve out. For Champion of Chaos, I mean the card got nerfed, but in aggressive decks like this, especially with help from Bandit Queen and Rapid Shot, the card is still great. It's just more fragile, like it gets traded a little easier now and gets killed a little easier than before, but it's still a good card in this deck, so still an automatic 4th. Next we have the 4-drops. A lot of lists run like 3 Bandit Queen, 3 Impending Doom, but I heavily disagree with this, and VSarius came around on that too and agreed that either it has to be like 4 Impending Doom and 3 Bandit Queen, or if it's only 6 4-drops, it's like 4 Impending Doom and 2 Bandit Queen. He has been running 7 for a while, but I could convince him that that's probably just more and more top end, making the deck kind of clunkier, and we needed to get more power in the deck because he was definitely running way too little. So that's why we have 4 Impending Doom, 2 Bandit Queen, simply because Impending Doom is like this really great standalone threat. If the opponent deals with everything and you drop an Impending Doom and they don't stop it, Impending Doom easily wins the game, attacking once or twice and then finishing them with burn spells. It's just a really high impact card, while Bandit Queen is like sort of a synergy and like situational card. Card can be great if you have a couple other units, especially like Champion of Chaos and stuff, but in a lot of scenarios, Impending Doom, like on average, Impending Doom will be a better 4-drop. But it's nice to have Bandit Queen to like break open some of those stalls, and or just like use her as like a pseudo burn spell for 4 on turn 4 that your opponent might have to also like get rid of afterwards. So she just adds like some additional punch to the deck and a little more power, and makes the earlier drops a little more relevant later in the game, basically. And after that we have 1 Soulfire Drake. That's something that Finkel and VSarius team came up with, simply to give the deck a little more punch, a little more units that act as burn spell plus that hit the opponent at least once, and then after that basically can either threaten to deal damage again or have to be answered by the opponent, buying us some more time and forcing the opponent into a reactive role. That's why they wanted that Soulfire Drake to get the unit count a bit up and the power level of the deck overall, without making it too clunky. So their choice basically was like Force Flame Blast or Soulfire Drake, and they felt like Soulfire Drake is better than like an 8 clunky burn spell, because a lot of the time it does the same or more. Which seems reasonable, like I don't mind that reasoning. Alright, on to the spells. We have like the big burn spells, 3 Flame Blast and 4 Obliterate. In this deck, Obliterate's just like a little more efficient, since you occasionally want to kill units to let our units attack again. So it's nice to kill a unit and deal some damage to their face. Also 6 damage for 5 power is a better ratio than Flame Blast, which deals 5 for 5. So, but Flame Blast has the upside of being either used as like a tempo play earlier on if you hit the influence threshold, or deal like a lot more damage for a single card if the game goes longer and you flood out a bit. So they both have different upsides, but this is overall a little more efficient than Flame Blast, which is why there's 4 and 3 Flame Blast. And playing too many of those, as mentioned, can be like a bit clunky, and you might get into situations where you get under too much pressure. So having a charge unit that also deals sort of direct damage to the opponent, but also forces them to interact, is a bit better than having too many clunky burn spells. And we have 4 Rapid Shot, great synergy with cards like Pyroknight and Champion of Chaos, and also just allows us to efficiently deal with bigger units of the opponent while keep pushing into them. Just a very efficient, powerful card. And I think gets better if you play 4 Pyroknights to use it as like a mini Obliterate more often. 4 Torch, not much explanation needed. Great burn spell, great removal, flexible, efficient card, one of the best cards in the game. 3 Annihilate, sort of like this a similar slot of like Vanquish in Justice decks basically, especially in a world with so many time decks where there's tons of Titans and other like single faction cards that need to be dealt with. Also in the mirror there is Instigator and Impending Doom, occasionally Soulfire Drake or Cabal Countess and stuff like that, or like an ultimated Pyroknight if it gets to that. There's just a lot of good targets right now, and the instant speed, like the fast spell speed, definitely matters as well. It's just better positioned than Suffocate right now and deals with more important targets basically. Quarry just for like added consistency, and also it's nice to go like turn 2 Quarry and turn 3 Impending Doom, for example, to cheat out more expensive cards earlier. Just overall a card that ties the deck a bit more together, gives it a little more power while also giving it more consistency. Vara's Favor, like in my opinion, the best shadow card in the entire game, and a great way to allow the 1-drops to attack a little longer, get some extra value from our power base basically. And yeah, Obliterate has already been covered. And last but not least, we have the power base basically. VSarius used to run 28 power, which was honestly ridiculously low and ridiculously greedy, and he came around on agreeing with that. And while Kampfcrit basically runs like 31 power, like 25 base power and 6 favors, I don't like that too much. Like 31 seems a bit heavy-ish for this deck, and even if I would want to run 31, which might be reasonable to do, I wouldn't want 6 favors. Like 6 favors are so clunky and so slow, and Caleb's favor is such a like marginal card that I think it's just not worth it, because a lot of the time you will have to like favor for power instead of making a curve drop, which is just miserable. And which is why we came up with just slightly reducing the power to 30, keeping the 4 good favors, because Vara's favor is just so good. So we want 4 of those, and going up with the base power by 1 Granite Monument to have a little faster and smoother power development while having a similar amount of flood protection, since a Granite Monument is arguably a bit more impactful than a Caleb's Favor. And yeah, the influence is tilted a bit towards red because of like the triple red cards of Soulfire, Drake, and Flame Blast. Bandit Queen costs double red. Champion of Chaos needs Overwhelm more than Deadly most of the time, so you want the triple red for this one first as well. And we have the red 1-drop, so you need a lot of red, which is why there's like the heavy focus on red sigils. But effectively the deck has the same amount of fire and shadow with Vara's Favor, since it's like 9 fire sources and 9 shadow sources between Sigil and Favor, and then the 12 duels. Cyrus told me that the 4 seal were absolutely fine, which I can see. Like, my intuition would have been to run 3, but I can totally see 4 being fine, just because the deck needs to curve out a lot, and seal gives you like the flexibility of having the influence you need early. to make the right plays, and also makes it more likely early to set up like triple red for Flame Blast and triple influence for Champion of Chaos and stuff like that. It can be a bit problematic later sometimes, but it's better to have a more stable and flexible influence early than, for example, to get that second ability of Champion of Chaos online more reliably, for example. So yeah, that's basically the deck and the current version that we are at. VSarius and I were pretty happy with how this list looks. It looks a lot more cleaned up and more consistent. And he also like played a bunch of games after we came up with this list, and immediately was like, yeah, I gotta admit the 30 power feels a lot better. Like deck feels a lot smoother and stable than before, basically, and it doesn't feel bad at all to have a couple more power in the deck, because he was like scared of flooding out too much and falling short of killing his opponent too often because of not having enough gas. But he even had like a game where he flooded out to like 9 power and still won because the cards he drew were like powerful enough, and he drew like a Flame Blast, which was able to deal like basically enough damage to be worth like 1.5 cards, sort of. So also, if you like flood out to 9 power, it's not because that 1 or 2 more power that you added to the deck. Like even if you maybe like had the 28 power there, maybe you would have flooded out to 8. It's not like that big of a deal. That's something that people keep forgetting. If you flood out that heavily, it's not because of the 1 or 2 power more that you play. But if you are 1 power short, like having 1 power more drawn is not gonna make or break you in most cases. But drawing 1 power too little, like too few, early on, easily makes or breaks a lot of decks. So yeah, this is the latest version of Burn Queen, as VSarius and I would recommend it, and deck looks pretty streamlined, pretty cleaned up, and now also has like the appropriate amount of power to support what it's doing, what it wants to do, basically. Alright, so that's it for the deck list. Gonna hop into some rank games as usual to show it in action, and stay tuned for the first half of the games in a moment. Thanks for watching.